Okay, welcome everyone to the Shamanism Playgroup. Very excited tonight to be interviewing Endre Hoffmann, who's been known as a doctor of self-worth. And I know this is a topic that's going to excite a lot of people because self-worth is a very important thing in the world. And I know a lot of people that have issues with self-worth. And I'm sure with Endre, when he's sharing his story, he's going to help pass on his secrets as to how to feel worthy and be confident. Because as you know, I train healers, and a lot of healers have problems with self-worth. So without any hesitation, I'd like to introduce Endre Hoffmann, who's actually currently in Hungary. He's been around the world in many places, and we'll sort of just go with the flow how it starts. So welcome, Endre.
Thanks very much. Great to be on your stage. I'm so happy to be able to shed some light on my journey, but I believe we all have very parallel lives, and I can go into the story, and especially probably I would go back to as far as my family line. I don't normally go this far, but it really highlights how generations impacting each other at times the worst possible way. My grandfather, he was I didn't know too much. Yeah, my grandfather was the alcoholist. He had addictions. So from from that place, my grandfather had to survive that domestic violence, and he was the type of aggressive drinker. So my grandfather had set up a life, and this is all about survival, really the mind. He has created a life with rules. He had this rule-based life that what you can do, and he had sort of, I think, 2 or 3 times a year, he had a tiny little speck of alcohol, spirit, but that was it for him. And I remember I was visiting him at the age of 4 or 5 or 6, and he was through the Second World War. He still applied rules. He was stuck in the past, 50 years after the war, because he spent 3 or 4 years in a labor camp in Russia, and they had rules there that you are not allowed to drink until you finish your food. And basically, he in the 1980s, we were still, as you know, his family had to abide these rules. Were mental, but he was carrying these patterns for the next 50 years. And with my father, the relationship didn't go well either. My dad was kicked out of the family because he was not behaving probably. He must have been challenging the rules. And these two had been fighting a lot. It was a quite stressful and fearful relationship. And I arrived in the 1970s in this family. And guess what? I didn't connect with my father too well. Not from the age of 3 or 4, as far as I remember. I felt I didn't feel love. That was the issue, probably. I felt abandoned, not feeling good enough. And this has then started 34 years of looking for the answers. What's wrong with me? The question was wrong straight away, but I did not know this. And as early as possible, I tried my best to fit in to to be loved by my dad, and it didn't work. So I was trying to prove myself in every possible way, and also because hardworking was a virtue in our family. So you have to work hard. My dad was working 6 or 7 days, and he started his business, and he was always stressed. He's he's he was aggressive. He had to be right. He was blaming others within the family and in his business. I remember in his business, he had these big red signs to what people could do and could not. And he brought a lot of struggle home. Home was a minefield. I was always called out for something that I haven't done or haven't done good enough. And it's not good enough has been planted quite deeply in my head. And because of this hardworking pattern, he worked 5 days a week, and the next 2 days, which would have been a weekend, we family went out to these plots of lands. We had 3 of them to work on the lands. And I hated it. I hated it so much. I didn't understand why I cannot choose what to do with my parents. But that wasn't fun. And I realized probably at the age of 7 that if I start to do sports, then I probably have games over the weekends and I can escape this madness. And that basically became my ultimate solution. And I took sports very seriously, and I thought maybe my dad will love results. So I think at the age of 13, I was a national champion in basketball with the team. I was the captain. That was very exciting. And then I went running marathons. Like, it's still coming from this, I have to prove myself, to gain his love, appreciation. But from it, his vocabulary didn't have "well done, son," "I love you," or "congratulations." I never heard anything like that from my grandparents or 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 my dad. And I was on this mission to fix myself up because I thought there is something wrong with me. I was very shy. I couldn't speak in front of people. Unfortunately, my face went red. It was very common at that age. And I was able to go as far as university to call in sick if I had to, unfortunately, speak in front of a group or a class or any time in front of more than 2 people. And it went as long as the end of university when I had to do the thesis and, of course, the last exams. So somehow I got through them, and I didn't know who I was. I was so disconnected from myself that I don't know if you're familiar with Central Europe, but communism was working in 5-year terms. They call this the National 5-Year Plan. They came up with goals to reach. And I was so clueless about who I was or what my life is about that I looked at sort of the age of 18. Well, what shall I do with my life? The only type of security I knew was money. So I thought, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I should do with my life or could do with my life. I thought if I have money, I'm better off not knowing who I am or what to do than not having money and have no clue. And this is how I ended up working in finance, and I chose the financial field. That was the most paid at that time. So I worked 5 years in banking, and it was fun. I ended up working for a brokerage firm as a fixed income broker, and the inner dissatisfaction, this feeling of, I don't know if it's me. And I've seen these people, burnt out people who were to work there for the next 20, 30 years. I thought, it cannot be a life for me. I could not get used to the idea of 3 weeks holidays and asking for a time when I can go on holiday. So I left and I went to work in Ireland. So I dropped this wonderful career and job, and I ended up working in the production lines in Ireland as let's say a half legal worker at the time. It was 2001 before Hungary got an EU membership. So it was tricky times, and I realized when I was there with a girlfriend, probably spent there about a year, and I saw this movie, absolutely inspiring, the first Lord of the Rings. I said, well, where is this place? Where did they shoot this movie? So I had this inner calling to go to New Zealand, and shortly after we ventured to New Zealand. That's 2002, I believe, and we were to start a new life. The girlfriend, we're very excited to have a family and have a fresh start, because I thought if I go far away from my dad, by the way, that's the farthest point on planet Earth from my dad, I thought then I'll resolve this, because obviously his vicinity was fairly toxic, highly critical. And obviously with the time zones separated, we didn't speak too much, sort of every 2 months, one phone call, and mostly he wasn't around because he was focusing on other things, which was perfect. But this inner satisfaction, the dissatisfaction inside, the insecurity didn't go away. It was a very hard start. I lost my girlfriend within 3 months. She decided to leave me and have an easier way to immigrate. And I was heartbroken. I started to travel around, and I was hoping that I can stay in the country. I worked in odd jobs, but I ended up working for GE, Money GE Finance. And again, I wasn't picked to be promoted. I wasn't getting the successes that I was hoping for. And at one time, I decided, well, it looks like this corporate wouldn't work for me. Then I will go traveling. Maybe I'll find the answers through traveling. So then I decided, well, I will work for 9 months, and for 3 months I'll be traveling here and there, looking for spiritual gurus, shamans, and healers to find the answers about what's wrong with me and where is the problem. Why am I this broken? It's almost like, Neo had this thing in his head in the Matrix movie. I was always looking for more, and I traveled probably 60 or 70 countries in this quest to find the answers, to find myself and find a way home. And it didn't work. I had a lot of adventures, and I probably should still create a few books from my travel diaries, but it didn't resolve my issues. And what happened after 5 years in New Zealand, I said, well, I found a girlfriend who is my wife now, so that's amazing. And you can imagine who I have attracted. Exactly my patterns. She was not feeling good enough, lack of confidence, perfect mirror. And we did a holiday to Europe, and I was so focused on freedom and getting a new life that we didn't go back to New Zealand after our holiday. And I started working in a network marketing business. And network marketing is really putting out there the chance of, working with a team and having a wonderful lifestyle. Now that didn't work for me because I still had these patterns of unworthiness or I don't deserve it. And I've learned that pattern through pain and struggle, and the business grown up to a point and it collapsed. And I started up another one. It took me 5 years. But I had these escape patterns, and it switched on. I had one child already. The second was on the way. And I remember I was working again 15, 16 hours, chasing people and trying to get sales. And eventually the family started to put a pressure on us. Now you are a dad, the second child on the way. Now you really have to settle. Now, when someone said this to me, I said, well, all right, where's the next country I want to go to? Because I don't want anyone to tell me what to do. But I'm thinking now back, really the worst line to me, and I've heard this over and over again, you are like your dad. Like, that was a knife into my heart because, see, I hated this man called Dad, and I never wanted to be like him. And I've seen this happening over and over again. People either turn out almost a copy of their dad or quite the opposite. Yet I was running away from him all along. I picked up his patterns of behavior, how he was dealing with people, the egoistic patterns that I was running. I was probably quite arrogant too at the time. And when it came to this point again, 5 years at home, and my dad was again these businesses, then I thought Australia will be the answer. The escape pattern again switched on, and basically a 6-month pregnant wife and one child, and the three of us started a new life in Australia. And again, a new place, fitting in, my patterns kicked in, working hard. And I realized by the time I want to be free, I want to be an inspiring dad. But within about 3 or 4 years, I worked 12 hours a day. I was driving trucks because that's what I found pays the most, because money was still my answer to feeling safe and secure. And I launched a side hustle to break out of the job. Now, this created a massive trap. I started to be working 15 hours, 2, 3 hours at home in the home business, 12 hours at work. And I knew a good citizen should contribute. So on Sundays, I went to, I'm not too sure if you're familiar with RFS. Of course, you are. From New South Wales, there's the Rural Fire Service. I know you have a different one in Victoria, but I was volunteering. I was working 5, 6 days a week, and we didn't get ahead. But most painfully, my wife started to see me exactly like my dad. My kids being alienated. They didn't connect with me. And eventually, around 2017, 18, it was this week. I remember I almost caused 1 or 2 accidents. I fell asleep because I was driving at night. It was on M5 Sydney road. I was driving long trucks, as you can imagine, B doubles. And when I got home, I usually took some time to connect with my children, and they wanted to have, bad time stories, and I was reading them. And sometimes I led them to slap me in the face when I fell asleep because I was so tired and exhausted. And that night has become again a slapping competition. And it was kind of fun. They were young kids, but for me, I couldn't believe that I have been such a failure. The whole life was about to collapse because when they didn't see me, I was crying. How was I able to end up at this deep point? But the morning was the topping when my wife asked me, and she said, "Is it time for us to divorce?" And my words were collapsing. My health wasn't good with driving in the trucks. And eventually I said to her, well, I'm trying to change things here, and I know you guys don't trust me, but by the time I probably have spent over $100,000 on any type of help I could get through psychology. I was reading probably 200-300 self-help books, probably the best ones, Stephen Covey and Anthony Robbins, the biggest names. And I've been on their events, and I paid, of course, every time thousands and thousands of dollars. And it seemed like it did not work for me. I'm broken. And I found out later that, with really strong patterns, the mind is selective. It's hanging on to the old identity and applies something small and insignificant from these programs to keep the status quo, the old version of self-image, old version of identity. And it cost me a lot. So they were really unhappy about dad spending money on his transformation, which is not happening now for 5 or 6 years. And to my biggest surprise, my wife did not divorce. But at that time, I decided to let go all of I had a long list of goals, and I missed every goalpost, every plan that I had up to that point. And I decided that I will resolve this. I don't know how, and I don't know how long and how much more money, but I said, I'll find someone who can get into my head, if it's in my head, or into my heart, and live a heart-based, inspiring life, and become the dad I didn't have, or the dad my kids deserve. And unfortunately, it took me another 6 months, but I said to myself, if it's for the rest of my life, this project, that's okay. At least then, hopefully, I will turn good out of this generational trauma that have been going on before me. And interestingly, I found Matt Catling in Sydney, probably one of the top coaches and emotional healers in Australia. And within 6 months, he was able to dig me out. The true self started to come out, and this transformation was bringing alive the doctor of self-worth. As when things shifted for me through 1.5 hour sessions and some group work, then basically I've seen this was such a transformational experience that my life is reset. I will start afresh a new life of potential, and then I realized I have to help others. If this does not have to be 34 years of struggle, pain, and losing relationships and going mental, and I didn't talk about the lost investments that so much money I, out of not feeling worthy, I've lost. I said, if there is a shorter way, probably that's me. I will have to help people if I went through this experience with my dad. My dad died, unfortunately, about 5 or 6 years ago, because his patterns, and I think this is a big one too, that patterns of anger, patterns of fears, and insecurities that he had, anxiety, has eventually got to his health. He has contracted. I don't know if it's contracted. I would say he manifested 4 deadly diseases. One of them was cancer. And he died quite early at the age of sort of 59, 60. As I believe that carried negative emotions, these patterns will take one's health. It's not when, or it's not a question to me, because I see it happening over and over again. It's just when it's going to happen, when health will start to deteriorate. So I believe we all have massive responsibility around emotional health and how we unlock our potential in this planet, in this life. And since then, I've been helping a lot of people through groups and one-on-one. I've become the father I've always wanted to be, and I've unlocked this new level of freedom. And now, this last year, we've been traveling around Europe for 6 months, looking for a new place to live. Yesterday, we bought a country home near the Austrian-Hungarian border. And I'll be back in Australia within 2 months, because I have some tidy up to do. But I realized my life is about seeing these wonderful transformations that I see happening around my clients who have these wonderful new experiences out when they have these emotional and mental breakthroughs about their beliefs, what's possible, what they deserve. And now I have a few social media pages, and I have a hot podcast, and Paul was on the podcast. I'm so excited about releasing that episode, and you guys will see it. It takes a few weeks. I have a few lined up, which is changing lives. I believe every story is changing lives, and every story is a seed for you to take some learnings that you can apply. Or at times the mind needs, you may have heard this, and this is my theory maybe, and I would love you to maybe borrow that. I believe that the subconscious mind is stacking. Stacking, I believe, means that it's looking for reasons to do one thing or not. And if you have, enough stories to support your own case of transformation, and then you can have a new life, then you have a better chance of level of commitment, and you have a better chance to have reference points of, oh yes, why not me this time? And all you need then is just a master, and the master appears when you're ready. I don't know how this sits. Have you got any questions? Shortly, this is my story.
Okay,
Go ahead, Paul.
I've got a good question for you. So from your experience that you went through with struggling with not feeling good enough, What do you feel the main cause is that leads to people having low self-worth from your experience, yourself and with your clients?
What I found is 90% is usually coming from, sometimes I would say past life, past generations, but usually there are events in childhood that has been significant emotionally. Usually there are negative emotions attached to it, and it could have been an embarrassing situation where they could not perform in front of a group. Like I tend to find people's stories in schools, or maybe a school teacher has been, quite negative, or or telling someone that, hey, don't do this, you're hopeless, or you're not going to amount to anything. That was a big one for me from my dad. Or the stories of, if you're not gonna get good grades. And I believe at that age, if an authority is talking, it's literally writing a CD, burning a CD into someone's head. And those are affecting later life situations, or most of them creating lack of results.
Yeah, so based on what you said in your story, that you're looking for validation, and of course, as children just coming into the world, we are looking for validation to be accepted in the world, right? And of course, that quite often means that we're looking for validation from unconscious people, and therefore we tend to identify ourselves outside of ourselves. And I think you even use the word disconnect from yourself, because as you know, if we look at ourselves, then we are all worthy. We're all amazing spirits, right? So from your experiences then, how do you, the way you help your clients, what is the techniques that you use to help them get their self-worth back?
My approach is mainly NLP. So I love NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, is looking at what may have happened. I love to find the root, because I
Yeah.
come across a lot of people who had hundreds of thousands of events replayed in not feeling good enough, or replayed in feeling unworthy. And of course, because the word is only a reflection, those limiting patterns are just being replayed and replayed and replayed in later life. I help them to, let's say, relax into their mind and their body, rather in their body, because the body holds these experiences, and then we look for the root of it, and it pops up. So imagine, I believe your mind is a wonderful recording device of the past. It records every tiny little information or event. It has emotions attached to it. So it's almost like this small video films about anything in the past. The problem is you could have only processed about 1% of what happened there. And what you said, Paul, is looking for validation. The problem is, up to the age of 10 or 12, there is no filter to what happens. I usually say there is not a conscious critical factor, because there is only unconscious mind working at the time. So people or children are highly suggestible, especially by authorities or people who love them. And this is the main problem when they take that on board. So what I tend to do, I help them to look and find whatever the root was, and reconnect them to the person, the being they had been well before that. Because they we have not usually come to this life limited, as you said. We are wonderful human beings. Everyone is so valuable. Yet when people carrying these limiting patterns for 30, 40 years. They don't remember who they were before. So my work is unlocking that children, unlocking that powerful human being to play again, to believe in themselves, to be worthy. That's pretty much what I do. And of course, in doing this kind of therapy, if you could call it, but I use other ones as well, matrix therapy a bit and inner child work. So I use what works. So my approach is get results. I'm not attached to one technique. Is restoring the energetic field, is restoring, reconnect them to this authentic self that I talk about a lot. And then what happens usually is it creates space. It creates this new space to create what they want, because they are not focused on anymore on the problem or the problems they had. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. I like an interesting point that you made was when you resisted your father. Because I like the comment, what you resist persists. And I've found that a lot with clients too, that quite often when I say to them, my God, you're acting like your mother, they go, oh my God, am I really? And we tend to resist people that we didn't like as a child, which is quite often our parents. Because I became a bit like my father in a similar way, right? And then you can't believe that you're actually acting like they did because you didn't like the way they did. And it's quite interesting as I can, it's an escape pattern that was the term that you used, that quite often people do become like their parents rather than learning from the experience initially. It's a really interesting point that you made. We've got, do you want to make a comment on that, and then we'll get Davina to, she's got a question.
I wanted to ask Davina, do you have a question for us? Do you want to comment?
Yeah, Davina.
Yes, please. I feel that I knew before I was born that neither of my parents wanted me. My father didn't want a third child. He admits when I was older that mum bullied him into having a third child. And she wanted to have twin boys who she was going to name Scott and Robin. I was a child sitting on the lounge room floor while my parents had guests over, and my father just said, oh yeah, I never wanted her. And I sort of looked at him and he said, yeah, your mother, the story I've just told you. So what do you do with that sort of knowledge?
Well, see, my approach, and you may have heard this before, I think Einstein said this, that knowledge is limited, but imagination brings most of the answers. And see, I work with, let's say, the timeline as back as we need to. I don't hang on to age or a time, because there has been a time before. And if I need to help clients through going back to past generation or past lives, I'm happy to do that, because I'm being very flexible. So obviously, yeah, at times I end up working with people in the womb or well before. But what we really need to find is a time where I'm unwanted didn't exist. Because that's where I believe that you can reconnect to being wanted, supported, feeling safe and loved. And that is a new experience. And I believe experiences change lives, not knowledge, and not, especially not information. Because like, imagine now, there's so much information on the internet, right? It doesn't change people's lives. Free.
Does that answer your point, Davina?
Partially.
Partially. Do you want to elaborate more, Davina, as to what you're looking for, the answer, what you want to address?
When Doctor was speaking then, I'm thinking about a time that I had a hypnotic regression, and I found myself as a child on the edge of a volcanic island, and the community was off in these canoes paddling away, and I was this preschooler, toddler, on the edge of the island that everyone had forgotten. It was like the worst idea of Home Alone, you know what I mean? Because the volcano was about to explode. So how far can I go back? I mean, that sounds to me pretty far back. How far can I go back before I could find something positive is what I'm trying to work out in my head.
Well, Davina, mind is so stuck in usual patterns. I would not recommend you doing this on your own, because it just loves familiar. Look, evolution has designed the mind to hang on to what we know, even if it doesn't serve us. So I can sort of help you with the how, but if you get stuck in this one, you really need to get you 100% committed for change. And that takes a bit of work sometimes, because people say, well, I'm committed, I'm ready, yet they're still carrying it over and over and over. So techniques will actually not work when your mind is not primed or prepared for getting through this. And secondly, what you want to find is, what could you learn about yourself through these experiences that is empowering, that is positive, and then you could use now or in the future. And I think this is where therapy or transformational work, there are these tipping points when people could just slip back and fail changing themselves. This is where I believe a practitioner, probably like Paul, myself, is needed. And the way I have made sure, for example, how I offer my services, I give people guarantees, because I make sure that, and I give away a good 1 hour free, because I want to know if this person is ready for transformation. And then I risk, which has not been risked, because I never had to go refund, but I happy to do it. And then I say, well, we'll do this work together.
Say that I appreciate your pointing out the difference between knowledge and information. That was helpful. So was the idea of you were going through what you get out of it. I think what I've got out of these past experiences is resilience. I'm still here. I'm keeping on going. So there's the resilience.
Can I just add on to that point, Davina? I think this is going to help you, and I do a lot of this with my training with my students, is I believe that we come to the planet to have experiences, which then helps us help humanity, right? And if you look at the doctor here of self-worth, he's a good example. Like, he created experiences where he felt low self-worth as a child. Then he actually went through that and learnt how to overcome it, so then he could help other people. Whereas I think a lot of us tend to take our experiences personally, whereas I think they're not personal. They're actually, we create experiences, even from before we come to the planet, so that we can help other people. And I look at the question, well, how many people on the planet don't feel wanted or feel abandoned? A lot. Yeah. And maybe you went through that experience to learn things so that you could help other people who feel abandoned, right? Like as a good example, I had a client of mine. She got sold as a sex slave at the age of 6 years old. Now she's now back in India helping girls who go through that. So, but when she took it personally, oh my God, this is about me, and what's wrong with me? Why would my mum want to sell me? Well, she suffered. But when she understood it from a broader perspective, now I went through this experience so that I could learn things to be of service by helping other people going through it. So sometimes if you look at it from a broader perspective, that helps you understand the experience, I think.
This is beautiful, Paul. I would just add tiny two things here that may help you, Davina. One is, what if life is almost like going to the movies? Human life, I'm talking about. What if, soul is waiting to come to this wonderful journey? Now, let's stay with the movie example. If you wanted to go to the movies, what kind of film would you want to experience? Like, probably you want to go, well, take me to the extremes, and then let's have a happy end, and where the hero goes through all kind of troubles and roller coaster and end up at this beautiful, fantastic place, right? What if our lives is a journey where you would, from the soul's perspective, you would not enjoy, being the king's daughter, because dichotomy does not exist. And this is, I think this is where the wealth of experiences comes from, to experience the +10 and -10 type of experiences. Because how would you know freedom without experiencing stuck or limited? How would you know darkness to light? You wouldn't have a reference point. And this is really interesting, because you can only have this experience, I believe, on planet Earth. Hot, cold. You need to know hot to experience cold. You wouldn't know otherwise. And obviously you have a journey, and I believe you are on the right track if you connecting with us in these beautiful spaces, and you will make the plan as best as you can. I believe you get guidance from above, or as well you are, let's say, making decisions to that destination that you are heading toward. And I don't believe there is an issue if it takes you a few lifetimes to make it. Does that help?
As you're speaking, Andre, it helped me remember a really important point about self-worth. And this, in a way, it relates to a point from Eckhart Tolle. And he said it's really important not to identify ourselves by our experiences. We're not our experiences, we're not our thoughts, we're not our emotions. But if we identify ourselves with our experiences, well, we're going to feel like shit, right? Oh, I got abused, or someone did this to me, or, someone told me off or something as a child. But if you see your self-worth inside, well, by reconnecting to who you are, knowing that you're independent of your experiences, and that's why Eckhart Tolle says, a bit like you were saying, you observe your experiences like it's a movie, but it's not you. But see, if you identify yourself with your experiences, well, you're going to feel low self-worth. But if you're really connected to who you are internally, as what Eckhart Tolle would say, then you're not as affected by experiences. You're having this experience, but that doesn't mean you're less worthy, right? Because someone told me they didn't want me as a child or something. Oh, okay, I had this experience, but that's not me. I had the experience to learn something. Whereas a lot of people define their self-worth externally. Yeah.
What comes to me, that I might just add just a tiny one here, is that I believe some limitations are so deeply rooted that initially, and this is why I normally just come in for, it's 3-6 months, where people unstuck, release themselves from those old vicious circles of whatever they're hanging on to. Abandon this one, or I'm not wanted. But then, because I believe each person usually who has self-worth issues, there's 2-3 bigger patterns are holding them back, almost like chains. If someone comes at the right time and cut those chains, what I see happening, and this is really exciting, because this is where I have nothing to do pretty much with my clients anymore. When they're gone, then they are able to then be there for themselves, and the mind is now sort of serving them. So they've broken through or out of that initial vicious circle, and they can really take on growth mindset, and let's say they have a so much more resilient mind, a self-empowered mind, where their growth journey is accelerating without that where you have to work with someone that long. Because I still believe you better have a few mentors around, but it wouldn't have to working hard on that thing anymore. But I think just one last idea. I thought I have met a lot of people who decided, well, I'm working on my healing, but they've been working on the healing for 15 years. So be careful with what's the goal.
Yeah.
Because you really need to think past the healing or how you want to show up, rather than working on yourself or working on that thing, because you could slip in to the problem again. I hope that helps you.
Thank you.
There's a comment that David made in the chat room. So David, do you want to talk about that? He made this comment about a quote, "Pain is inevitable, suffering is a choice." David, would you like to make a comment on that? Or
Sure. So I guess why this connected with me is kind of related to what Dr. Endre was saying. I think recognizing the triggers or the things that have led you to believe your value or your self-worth, I think it's important to recognize that. But I think the important thing is then choosing what you do with that information, instead of healing for 15 years. I think pain is always inevitable. It's always going to happen. It's part of life. And if we accept that that's part of life, then it's easier for us to determine what we use with that information. And then I believe we then have the choice to decide whether we become the victim of that pain, or we become the survivor or the person that conquers the pain. And based on that decision, we can then be released from suffering. Whereas if we become the victim all the time, the pain is then something that drives us to suffer. But if we find ways to acknowledge it, accept it, heal, move on, and grow from it, then I think only at that point we can really escape ourselves from the suffering.
Yeah, I think that really resonates, David. Thank you very much. I believe, Davina, maybe one tiny seed more is, and this is a massive problem with traditional psychology today. That's what I tend to find, because I get to see people who have been in therapy, is they working on the problem. And if someone is focusing on the problem, paying attention to the problem, working on the problem, they will create more of the problem. So I believe focus, energy, and attention is creating your reality and your results. So let's say my approach, and this is NLP's approach, is to, yes, absolutely, let's pull out the root where you are stuck, but that's not what we are here for. We're looking at, well, where do you want to go to? And then how you could get there. And what skills, what identity you need to take on absorb to show up as that next version of you. And that really accelerates the journey. And I believe that is at times with psychologists, and there must be good ones, but I've heard many are not really focusing on at all.
Endre, that reminds me of a book I just read by Christopher Duncan called You're Not Broken. Have you heard that book?
I've heard about it, yeah.
Yeah. And he emphasized that point you just said and of course the title of the book suggests it, you're not broken, because quite often people think they need to be fixed, which means that they feel something's wrong with them, which of course what a lot of psychologists do is, I'll fix your problem. But what you're just saying is, I think, is consistent with Christopher Duncan in that it's not fixing, it's about connecting to who you are and what you want to create, not fixing a problem. Because if you fix a problem, then you got to keep creating problems to fix, right? So I like your emphasis. It's a good point.
But again, I think the questions, Davina, they predetermine the answers. So imagine, and that was me, I was asking the wrong question for 25 years. Why is this happening to me? Why me? What's wrong? Why I'm broken? I imagine you have this beautiful mind. It's almost like doing a Google search into the database. Remember, this mind cannot work from anything else but the past experiences up to this moment. Now, with this Google search, what's wrong with me? Why me? I pretty much put my attention on everything that tells me I'm a victim.
Yeah.
I lock myself up in the pattern with that wrong question.
Yeah.
Well, I could have asked a different question. I say, what if I'm a genius and I'm looking for a proof of that? I'm not saying it will, you still need to pull out the roots, I guess, but the question is crucial to have the right questions in either in therapy, change work, and maybe asking yourself, does this help?
It sounds great. So we're getting towards the end here, so I might just ask you, Andre, if there's some core messages that you'd want to pass on to people who have got issues with self-worth, what would you say? What are the core messages that you like to get across in your healing services to people about self-worth?
Well, first is I want you to believe, I want you to hang on to hope that it is possible to change. I didn't believe in this for 20 years, but I want you to hang on to the hope it's possible. Not just possible, it's possible for you. No matter what and how bad your story is, because the other thing I was telling to myself, oh, my case is special. I know it works for others, not for me. I'm beyond help. So I want you to reframe that and somehow sell yourself a new story or tell yourself a new story. Yes, transformation towards empowerment from lack of self-worth is possible. It's possible for you, or if you say to yourself, possible for me, and then what you want to look for, and this is the easiest thing, and I mean, it's multiplication in math. Like, look for someone who has consistent results in resolving exactly the problem that you have. That's all you need to do. Someone who has, hundreds of people behind them and getting consistent results. So you're not wasting your time and money. And adding on to that, if you are able to get some sort of guarantee, why not? Then make sure that you get the results that you want. But I believe if you go and hire someone that you have not done research, you have not resonated with, and you don't seem to get results after 3, 4, 5 sessions and nothing feels different, probably you are wasting your time and money.
Cool. Excellent point. So is there anything else that you haven't covered that you'd wanted to cover tonight?
Well, I was very open-minded. I didn't really have an agenda. Well, I love this work. If you find my pages, # Doctor of Self-Worth, I've got a web page as well.
Would you like to put your links where people can contact you? Can you put them in the chat room so people can copy them?
Let's use the online space to help each other and learn more about ourselves, because I believe there's always another level. I never thought I would be able to help other people at the level where I am now. So my challenge for you is not that you will transform whatever problems you have, but how far are you going to get with your new self, which has no limits? It's almost you could bring out what if 10 times more from your life than you think is possible? Because that's what I seem to experience with a lot of people most of the time. If you copy and paste, you'll be able to find, well, there's a book there, there's a few social pages, free groups you can engage in. Your podcast with Paul coming out very soon. So never give up on yourself.
Cool. So is there any other questions that people have got before we go? One thing I like to do, Andre, when I finish, is the biggest thing people learn. Here's Michelle, she's coming right at the last moment, is what's the biggest thing you learned today? So let's just go around. Davina, what's the biggest thing you learned today about self-worth?
I think the biggest thing I've learned is that I'm very resilient.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a great characteristic to help other people with. David, what's the biggest thing you learned today?
The biggest thing I learned was that the improved, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was around like yourself is limitless. So it's up to you to set the limit of your next version.
Wow, that's powerful. Excellent. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. Anne, what was the biggest thing you learned today?
I think I need more time to digest.
Well, that's cool. Well, you can watch the replay again and digest. And yeah. Anna Maria, you're very quiet today. What's your
yeah.
thing you learned today?
Andre, thank you very much. You know, it is always very inspiring to see how, you know, our struggle with self-worth and the history, and how, you know, we, or you and myself as well, being able to acquire this self-worth and to look at yourself, you know, change, as we were saying, how change is possible. And yes, you know, as you were saying, we need help, and we need to, you know, inquire, and it's great to be here for all of us. And then you get inspired. I mean, I had a lot of help from Paul, and yeah, and a lot of change has happened, and it's still happening. So yeah,
Thank you for sharing that.
To get help when you need it. Yeah.
Thanks. Michelle, we're just actually finishing, so it'd probably be good for you to watch the replay, but maybe while you were here, is there one question that you really had on your mind when you came tonight, which you'd like to ask Andre right now?
Yeah, just staying confident. I mean, I connect, you know, connecting to and, you know, use guidance and say, I want to, you know, put in intention for the day to be confident and have everything go right. But it doesn't always happen that way. But I find when I set an intention, it works a lot better. But I'm finding that with work especially, I'm getting a lot of negative feedback. And I think that's why I clicked on to your meetup for tonight, to try and figure out different ways to resolve that in the way that I have been doing it.
And
yeah.
Andre, would you like to reply to that, Andre?
Thanks for that question. I believe if your mind is, I call, set to self-empowerment, as Paul said before, you would get to this wonderful place where, yes, there is a workplace where you go into each day and probably you have to put up with certain things, but you would not take it that personally, and you would not be sort of touched and emotionally triggered. And I think that's what we do, Paul and myself, is to create resilient minds that are way more powerful than the environment. But what I would say is that if there is, like, you have to kind of struggle with yourself, then first you need to be the best friend for you first, and maybe pull out the root of that lack of confidence, that, because I bet it has some roots in the past. And if you're able to pull it, then there's less negative self-talk going on. That creates this new space. And you know what happens then? I found probably the last 10, 15 clients, these workplaces seem to just disappear. And there is another one which is completely different, because the inner transformation then shifts the outside experience. Because, and probably it's a big one to say, and some of you may not believe this, I believe there's only one thing to work on, is on your self-image, or how you experience yourself, because then reality is nothing but a reflection of what's going on inside. So remember that. I think it's on my shirt today. Really play a bigger game, because you deserve it. And if you need help, then, well, accelerate the journey. Unfortunately, I told my whole story that it took me 34 years. Ask for help.
But of course, when we evolve, it might have taken you 34 years, but you can pass a lot of that experience on, so people can learn a lot quicker, which is what evolution is all about. So I'd just like to thanks for that, Michelle, that question. So you did get something out of it. It's coming the last moment. Everything's perfect. So I just like
Sorry,
to
but thank you for the. I will look forward to the replay. But yeah, so I do reground a lot, often when I'm feeling out, and that helps a lot. But I think there's just some limiting beliefs in the way that it keeps coming back, and I keep having to reground and set intentions for the day. When I'm focused on setting intentions for the morning and regrounding, it does make the day a lot better. But there must be limiting beliefs in there that keep kicking back for these old negative patterns to show up at work. So I get that there's some stuff there that I haven't cleared. And even though I work, quite conscientiously to keep resetting my intentions, they keep coming back. So that's why I joined in today, because I keep resetting intentions, but the old stuff just, the old patterns just keep coming back. Yeah.
Michelle, I was explaining something to one of my clients 3 days ago, and she said she's not getting the results that she wanted. And I said to her, what if you are running your life on a computer from the 1990s? Remember these Commodores, these first ones? And we're beating up that computer, the mind, all programming of the mind, that why is it not delivering that we're looking for? And when the old computer has one tiny bug, say there's a -1 in the multiplication, you tend to get always a minus result. And no matter what you're going to do, because of the formula is broken. And it's not you broken. There is something, as you said, is working against you with your best intentions, because the intentions are set, I get it. But remember, and maybe this will help, and I'm great that you asked these questions, because I usually just sum up the formula is that people are not getting, or they are not achieving their conscious goals. People are achieving their unconscious agenda, their unconscious needs met a certain way, which could have come from the past, and now it's not serving you anymore. But when you have an understanding of what might be holding you in this pattern, then imagine this. And Michelle, this will help you. Imagine if you didn't have to do I need to fix myself now because I have this conflict inside. Imagine if you didn't have conflict inside. There is this so much space to create a new life. Because the conflict is an emotional leak. It's taking vitality, energy. You wouldn't be in your creative space. It's taking away your energy and vitality to really live an inspired life. I hope this helps.
It makes a lot of sense. It really does.
Okay, guys, thanks a lot for that. So
Thank you, Paul.
I just want to thank all you guys for coming along and participating and asking questions, because it's all based on participation. And obviously, we'd like to thank Endre for his time to come and share his wisdom and share a lot about his journey, which is really powerful.
Thanks very much, guys. You are in
Oh, there you go.
good hands. I believe you have the best space to transform yourselves, because
Yeah.
Paul is clearly bringing in his experience and knowledge, so you don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah. So thanks a lot, guys, and then we'll make the replay available for you. Thanks for your time, Andre, and we look forward to catching you again soon. See you later.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye.
Paul. Thanks, Andre.
Thank
Thank
you.
you everyone so
Thank you,
much.
everyone.
Thank you for my late response. I really
Okay.
appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Enjoy the rest of your evening or your day.